Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Just Another Year Chicago. My name is Nick Brody, joined alongside my good friend and co-host, Tony Cepeda. We are bringing you today the wide receivers that we are hoping for this year's 2022 NFL Draft that Ryan Poles at least takes a look at. And if they fall in our hands, absolutely pick them up to get Justin Fields the targets that he needs. So instead of a mock draft today, we're going to have one more tomorrow that is going to be posted around lunch, but we might post it a little bit later, depending on how much activity is going on, because guess what? There could be trades tomorrow, and stay tuned for that. So we are looking into the second area of need. Earlier this week, we did linemen. Today, we are doing wide receivers. So Tony, why don't you break down for everybody before we begin today the current wide receiver room for the Chicago Bears and why wide receiver is such important in position for Justin Fields and Ryan Poles moving into this 2022 draft?
Yeah, one of the main reasons is we just have no real depth and experience at the wide receiver position. That's why it's important to, I know obviously drafting a rookie doesn't provide you the experience, but what it does is it at least gives you an opportunity to work with a young guy that could potentially blossom into start with the first guy, Darnell Mooney. He's obviously the guy right now in the locker room. The second guy who we thought may have been a top guy there was Byron Pringle. His future is up in the air at the moment. I don't know. We'll see what goes on with that. I don't know enough to comment directly on it.
So I can comment on it real fast. Apparently earlier this week, or, technically late last week, early this week, Byron Pringle was arrested in Florida for doing donuts in the middle of a parking lot in his car. But what makes it worse is that his son, very young son, was in the car. So he is denying everything. Everything's kind of up in the air right now. We don't know what's true, what's not true. So we're just putting that out there that Ryan Poles might have to have a little bit of a discussion with him about not being able to do. This is not GTA in real life. This is, or Forza, whatever video game, car driving game you play. Keep the donuts to just eating them, not driving them with your car. Anyway, Tony, please continue with the current wide receiver room.
Yes, I love eating donuts. So third, David Moore. Fourth, this is not necessarily in depth chart order. It could be, but that's kind of just talking about who's in the wide receiver room. So we got Dazz Newsome, Isaiah Coulter, Equanimeous St. Brown, and Nsimba Webster. I think I nailed that. He'll probably be more of a punt returner, kick returner kind of guy.
Did you hit on David Moore?
I did say his name. I didn't say anything about him specifically.
Just for clarity, this is not the wide receiver Moore that we wanted. That is obviously very big in Carolina, but he did have some success in Seattle. So and he's only 6 foot. So the biggest guy in the room is St. Brown at the moment, standing at 6'3" or 6'3.5", depending on what you want to say. But the Bears need size. So Tony, any more comments before moving into the first pick that we think should be taken?
Yeah, I can definitely see. There's obviously one of these guys probably won't be on the roster that we just named going into camp. Isaiah Coulter, I can see just because it's kind of the Dazz Newsome has a little sparkle to it. I think from last year, and I think Equanimeous is just a big enough guy where he's going to make it. That would be my thing. And then Webster will be a special teams guy. David Moore could also be the guy that's kind of who knows in my opinion. But you need another guy alongside Mooney. Byron Pringle, again, with who knows what's going to happen. He probably shouldn't be wide receiver number 2 anyway. So speaking of wide receiver number 2s, unless you have anything else, Nick, before we jump right into it.
No, I think I have to agree with you. I think David Moore is more so coming in right now. I think St. Brown is probably the safest out of those that you listed that might get cut, only because he worked with Luke Getsy's offense. But that was my only comment. So Tony and I put this list together. We're running through each one individually. So we chose 6 guys. So Tony, why don't you go through the first guy, the number 1 priority that we both want the Bears to take?
Yeah. So this guy he definitely has the potential to be a legitimate number 2, potentially number 1, honestly, taking over Darnell Mooney's spot, which not because Mooney would be bad, but this guy could be that good. George Pickens out of Georgia. So like I've said, I drafted him in the last mock draft. Every year there's that guy that'll fall because of, I don't want to call it off the field issues because that's not what it necessarily is with him. It's more injury stuff. Although there have been some reports, I guess, some scouts basically coming out saying he is kind of difficult to work with, difficult to coach, but it's anonymous scout number 2, whatever. Like, I don't know what any of that means. That could just be the Saints trying to get him to drop in the draft.
Exactly.
So he's a first round talent when he's healthy. He is absolutely first round talent. That's someone I'm willing to take a gamble on him being, a diva wide receiver. We have never seen any of those work out in the NFL. So again, injury concerns are the biggest factor. We live at an age where we have great trainers. Well, the NFL has great trainers. I think the Bears have gotten better trainers this past offseason. I guess we'll see. But I truly think he's going to be a superstar. He averages 5 catches a game, 107 yards. And
no, that was his last season. 5 catches last season,
I
107 yards. No. I wrote that out a little weird. Because he was injured last year, like Tony was saying.
I was trying to do the math in my head. Nick threw a couple stats in there for me, and I was like, that's a crazy average. So his last season, he technically had 5 catches, 107 yards, 21.4 yards per catch. Pretty good.
Obviously, hey, I'll take it.
Smallest sample size you could ever have.
But the one thing
it was because he got injured, of course. But
the one thing that I also want to throw out there that kind of makes me nervous and ironic is that Ryan Pace drafted Kevin White with his first pick as Bears GM. And now we are walking into a situation again of an injury-prone guy but the thing is, Kevin White was easy to work with. I think he was a very respectful guy. Just unfortunate what happened to him. But I think it's very funny that Ryan, both our GMs, both their last name starts with P, and overall, it's just weird to me. Just weird to me. But I like George Pickens too. If they can make it work, if more reports come out about his injuries being more, stay away, because the next guy that we want to take, Tony and I have been talking about for a super long time, and that's wide receiver Christian Watson out of North Dakota State. According to CBS, he has fallen slightly. He's projected to 47. He was projected a little bit higher earlier in the season, which the Bears were potentially going to have to trade up for him. But the Bears apparently have been keeping their eye on him, which is great. And I think that they might take the risk. If you listen to our lineman draft, I could see the Bears taking the risk, trying to get him in the late 40s pick that the Bears were going to get, that the Bears have from the LA Chargers. Mm-hmm. But if he's available at 39 and they want to pull the trigger on it, by all means. It's a very heavy lineman draft, which I'm excited about. And just full disclosure, Ryan Poles, I think, is playing kind of a little bit of, poker face to everybody. He said he's not worrying about wide receivers till day 2. I highly doubt that. Or day 3. I highly doubt that. Just putting that out there. So he'd fit great in the Luke Getsy's offense because of his size. He's kind of like a St. Brown type player, but better hands, better agility, young, cheaper contract. I love it. Give him a 4-year deal, coach, and let's make it happen. Bears also seem to have, he go into a smaller school, and I know that makes a lot of people nervous, but the thing is that shouldn't hurt you because other great players have gone to small. I mean, look at Jerry Rice, went to a small school. Mm-hmm. So just want to put that out there. And Tony, any more comments on Christian Watson? I mean, this guy is an absolute freak of nature at 6'4", 212. He's fast. He runs under a 4.4 time. I like him a lot, and his vertical jump makes it even more of a threat. So Tony, any more before we go on to our next pick?
Just if the Bears do end up taking him at 39, please credit me and Just Another Year Chicago, because if you recall, I broke that news on the mock draft, and then a bunch of Twitter scouts started linking the Bears to him about a month ago. So you're welcome in advance. That's why you watch us, because we are newsbreakers and psychics. So pick number 3, or potential wide receiver number 3, that the Bears could take, Jahan Dotson. Here's a guy I haven't talked about him, I think, since like that first mock draft or two. He's kind of slid under the radar. He went to Penn State, 5'11", 184. I think that's why. I think it's because of his size, smaller guy. But so he ran an unofficial 4.43 40 because I believe it wasn't at the combine. I think it was just at his pro day. So he's an interesting guy because, again, his size, of course, that's the big thing every year. But he is the whole game plan with him is to get him in space, kind of like a Tyreek Hill kind of situation. Just get him in space, let him do his thing, because he is fast, he's slippery, and he can take hits. He played the Big Ten. He got hit a ton, and he played through contact more than enough to kind of alleviate any worries. He is one of the more difficult receivers to cover in the class in general. So he dropped only He dropped only 2 of his 93 catchable targets last season. In general, we just need that on the team. We need, especially after a couple that was at that Vikings game with Damiere Byrd just dropping, I think it was 6 passes. We need a guy with sure hands. I would like to go with a little size to pair up with Darnell Mooney, but I would not be against taking Jahan Dotson.
Hey, fast works. I mean, Antonio Brown's not a big guy either. And I mean, obviously you want to avoid kind of what's been going on with him, but I like that pick too. I think he has gone under the radar. I think he could go a little later if needed. And if the Bears want to target him then. But I know size is a big concern for the Chicago Bears. And that's why with our next pick, we're going to go with David Bell from Purdue, 6'1", but 212. So he's a thick guy. He's built a little bit bigger than Byron Pringle right now, but he's considered one of the bigger wide receivers in the draft overall because of weight and height. He used to be one of my number ones, but I think getting a guy who is 6'3" like Pickens or 6'4" like Watson is more important, considering we have no big wide receivers besides St. Brown, and who is not a starter, by the way. No offense to him. He's definitely got to earn his stripes, but Bell had a huge year last year. In 2021, he had 93 receptions for almost 1,300 yards, 13.8 yards per catch, and 6 touchdowns. So he would almost be the biggest wide receiver on the roster, but he would provide brute strength. He knows how to beat off defenders. He's a decently fast guy. He's a little slower than Watson, some other guys that we've talked about, but he's a strong red zone target, and that's something that Justin Fields has been missing the last couple of years. I think he could be a good overall target, and I could see him going in a later round pick, potentially our 3rd round now. So I'm hoping for the best. I would love to get David Bell on the roster as well. He's a little bit more down on my list now than he used to be. Still would love to have him.
Yeah, I completely agree. He won me great bet against Michigan State, so I'm all the way in on him. So my final pick of the wide receiver draft talk, Justyn Ross out of Clemson. So this is a guy in general. If we go, lineman with our second round pick, our first pick, maybe we trade back a little because we have those 2 picks in the 3rd round. If we kind of basically shift back, he is a guy that we can go with that has the size at 6'4", 205. That still is pretty good. He's definitely he slipped on the draft boards recently. So this is a very deep wide receiver class, deep free agent class, of course, also for wide receivers. So he may not even end up being the best available at this point as we get later in the draft. And CBS does rank him as the 124th pick in the draft, but he might be a top target for the Bears, like we said, because Darnell Mooney, small and fast, need a big guy to go over the top and kind of just, throw a little something else out there than a bunch of just little guys running around. So he is coming off an injury, but because his skill set, again, is his size, it's not necessarily reliant on speed. So I'm not too worried that his injury is going to affect his ability to bounce back and produce. In 2021, he had 46 catches, 514 yards, 3 touchdowns. It's 11.2 yards per catch. Again, a little short due to injury, but it could be a steal, honestly, later in 4th round, maybe. 3rd,
I like Justyn Ross. I really do. I like Justyn Ross. I think that, injuries have hurt his value. If he didn't get injured, he could have been, a top 10 wide receiver or not that he's not a top 10 wide receiver in this draft. I'm talking about like a 1st round pick potentially because of his size, because he's like a DK Metcalf type player. And that's someone that the Bears are looking for. I mean, I think that'd be great. I know that there was rumors that the Bears were going to trade for Metcalf. So why not get your own through the draft? That would be my overall goal. Justyn Ross from Clemson, not a bad call. And then finally, we're going with Alec Pierce, homegrown kid, 6'3", 211, projected at pick 147. Bears have pick 148. That gives a good chance for us to get a couple linemen or DBs in advance before we get him. Homegrown kid expressed that he is a Bears fan. We weren't sure about that before. Is a Bears fan and has a 4.41 40 time as a 6'3", 211 dude. That's pretty dang awesome. That's straight athletic ability. But on top of it, he has a 40.5-inch vertical, meaning that he can win up and grab battles. He also is a super smart receiver. He's good at reading, and he's a good run blocker too. If you watch his clips back from Cincinnati, pretty awesome kid. So 2021, he had 52 receptions for 844 yards, 17 yards per catch, 7 touchdowns. The big man likes his stats. He likes to get after it. And that's what I like out of him as well. So Tony, any more comments before we close out?
No, I love that. I'm happy to hear he's a Bears fan because I know Anthony Davis is from Chicago and he is a Packers fan. So I'm glad to hear that we don't have a traitor in our midst. And I would be absolutely okay with that at that 148th pick mark. So
So the draft is tomorrow. The Bears have a lot of areas of need: lineman, wide receiver, cornerback, and even punter. We technically have a punter on the roster right now, but there's a lot that could happen. So tune in tomorrow for our fifth and final mock draft from Just Another Year Chicago. And stay tuned. We do have a sponsor for that episode that's giving a pretty good deal. So with that, thank you very much for joining this episode of Just Another Year Chicago. My name is Dick Brody, joined alongside my good friend and co-host Tony Cepeda, and we'll see you guys next time.